Welcome back to Tech Leadership Club. Today we are sitting down with an engineering powerhouse who has built the technology running behind the scenes of everyday lives. Welcome, Venkateshwaran Loganathan, or can I call you Venki or Venkat?
Venkat should be fine.
Venkat, yeah. Venkat has an incredible journey. He secured massive Bitcoin infrastructure, built voice AI from the ground up, and used smart centers to save millions of dollars in food waste, which is a appreciable cause. Because from my experience in many restaurants, the number one problem is the wastage of food. I think that could be a great value for the society, in my opinion, and is it even taken time to write books. Appreciate that, because as you grow, you take up more responsibility, you don't find time, but documenting knowledge with books, I think that's a great initiative. And you're also shaping the next generation as the dean of computer sciences. Congratulations. And today he is the senior director of engineering at Converse, where he's using AI to make global supply chain smarter. Venkat, it's an absolute privilege to have you on our podcast today. Welcome.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. And I think you covered it everything. So in short, like I'm Venkat, currently working as the Senior Director of Engineering at Converse, with a strong background and AML product development and scalable systems. So over the years, I have had the opportunity to work across multiple domains, from core engineering to building large-scale enterprise domains, solutions, and then spend some time in academia as well, like you mentioned. So I'm passionate about technology, leadership, and sharing knowledge. I really thank you for inviting me to this podcast. Once again, I'm really excited to be here and share my journey and perspectives.
So, Venkat, moving on, to start with, right, you have had such a diverse journey from software engineer to director. And as I know, many of the people in the IT industry now in the senior most positions are the first generation of IT employees, what I call, right? You don't get any proper guidance on what to do next. As you join as a software engineer, you're just looking for direction. What should I do next? But let's start simple. How does your interest actually begin in tech, right? And how did you navigate from software engineer to director?
Okay, so it actually began as a mix of curiosity and timing. If you ask me, like my first exposure to computers was during my seventh standard, uh, uh, with a small computer center near my home where I learned Foxborough basically. So at that point, I didn't know that it would become my career, but I was always fascinated by how a machine would respond to your instructions. Right? So then in college, like when I joined the college in 2004, there was a software boom in India around that time. Um, so getting into companies like Infosys, TCS, or Wipro, or any of the software managers was not just a job, matter of job, but it was a matter of pride. Okay,
Achievement, yeah.
that naturally like pulled me into the technology. So the real turning point actually came at Infosys, where I got opportunity to solve critical problems and work directly with clients. That's when I realized this is what I wanted to do. So if you would have met me then, I was actually a curious learner, always exploring, and those initial years built my engineering mindset. Okay, so I learned to not just solve problems, but solve them so they don't repeat. Okay? That's
Mm.
the mantra. So I developed systems thinking from that networking fundamentals where I was working. And then moving, I worked for Cognizant, working with Walmart. We developed a system called warm alarm response processing systems, to which is a system to prevent refrigeration failure, saving millions in food wastage across 500 stores. That's when I realized technology is about solving problems, but it's also making some real time impact. Okay, so from then my journey started. After Cognizant, I went on to for some of the startups. And I learned technology on the job mostly. Okay. Now I be like, this journey was really like a roller coaster, like the mindset I had, multiple technologies to pick up through the way. it all helped me to shape like a,
Cool, cool. See, this is one thing that I noticed, right, when we were talking about being on the podcast. You can't find many doctorates in tech industry. It's very rare, probably pretty rare. We can put it that way, right? What motivated you to go for a doctorate, right? And can you explain, how it helped you navigate your career or what lessons out of achieving a doctorate?
okay. So teaching was always my been my passion. Okay, so if you ask me what I would have become if I was not a software engineer, I would have definitely been a professor. So I hail from a family of teachers. My mother is a teacher, my grandmother
Ah,
taught
nice.
school, and my sister is a teacher. So like I hail from a family of teachers. I always wanted had that inclination towards teaching. Okay. So I had decided to pursue higher studies when I completed my bachelor's. Even though I was into the software industry, there is like I always wanted to do higher study, and the opportunities were available during that time. And initially, when I was into this, there were like opportunities to pursue MS through its through some work integrated learning program. And after I completed that MS, then I thought like I should definitely do doctorate as I was thinking earlier. So I registered. I was looking to like register my PhD in one of the universities, but most of the universities here in Tamil Nadu will only like register you if you are from an academic institution. So I had to search for universities who accept my thesis from an industry, and then had to register myself, take my PhD there. So like it was always there in my mind to complete a PhD, not a quick decision that I made to do. But then earlier from my childhood, I always wanted to. So that's how I got into it. And you know 2 years I wanted to take sabbatical. I always wanted to teach, as I told you, right? So at one point in time, I wanted to take a break from the industry and explore this passion of mine. So I took a sabbatical and moved into academia, where I was like working as a dean of computing science for an engineering college here at Coimbatore. Uh, satisfying my passion as well. So it was a combination of giving back, the curiosity, and doing something that I truly enjoy.
Amazing. I don't think many people could relate to this because, yeah, moving away from the industry, then going to education, giving back, then coming back to industry. I think I can hardly relate because I was trying to do this, but again, the time is the constraint, right? I want to see, I come from a government college, right? I see people go through whatever with the limited resources they have, they come out with their flying colors, but I want to assist those people to achieve, more in life. But due to time constraints, sometimes I do, sometimes I can't. But having that boldness to, step away completely from the industry and come back to it later, truly I appreciate it because I've been trying to do that, but it's not that easy.
Yeah, but it also helped me. Like when I was in the academia, I did not completely stop my industry experience. What I did is I took up projects. I was consulting for a company, okay, remotely.
Nice.
So I was working remotely even before the COVID all started. So there was a company in the US where I was like consulting them. Uh, that's where I built the coin that you were mentioning earlier, right? So yeah, I actually wanted to like really take my step into teaching and see like how that works. Those 2 years like there's a real transformation. Moving away from industry, getting into the academic institution, there are a lot of changes that you will encounter during your skill set there, and then coming back again to the industry is something like yeah, like you said, like not everybody will relate.
Yeah. It's not a comfortable choice. Let me put it that way,
Yeah,
right?
correct.
Cool. So if I met you in the early stages of your career, right? How you were, because I was pretty naive, right? When I started my IT career, I thought I knew something, but things were always bigger than my initial assumptions. But if I met you in your early career stages, right, at Infosys and Cognizant, what would that experience, be like?
So, like I told you, my earlier career was actually the launchpad for me. So, getting into campus placed into the Infosys campus at Mysore, getting into the fast track training program. And, it was something called as five pointer in Infosys, if you heard of
No.
like, okay. So all the training batches back then, so they'll assess you on a scale of five. All this training program, they'll award you marks. They'll have like very rigorous and very stringent testing system they have. So you need to go through it. And, they'll assign you on a point of five basically. So the five pointers are those who actually clear everything with 80, 90% and above on the topper ranks. So I was topping the entire batch during my training at Infosys. So there's a special, we would call a special place given to those people who get the 5 points, right? To choose between like which projects they want to get into. So you can
Mm.
take up teaching in the education and research department because in the training department they want only the best people to teach the entry level projects. So either you can go for an education and research trainer, or you can get into the R&D wing in the Infosys, or you can select any projects that you can work for. So I was given the option, but yeah, I mean, I selected the project because I wanted to have the real-time experience. And early in the career, I was like, directly put up into the client place. Back then, I was actually coding for network systems. I was creating a series of routers called secure routers for Norton. Basically, that was my client. So directly into network engineering, like how those systems work. It was all legacy systems with more concentration of C and C++ code, where you need to like spend a lot of time to understand code and develop. So those days were really like a launchpad for me. Like I got good mentors in the project. So you know it was like I was basically a curious learner. Okay, so even in the team,
Nice.
right? Even in the team, like we were around like 10 to 15 people who got placed in that particular project, along with the batchmates of trainees we had. And I was one of the member who was leading the team as well, the team of workers. I got the opportunity to directly work with the client in their labs, and that was really a fruitful time, I would say. Like I learned so many things, how the entire network works. Okay, so that basic actually gave me a lot of understanding of how systems work, how the data plans work, and it also brought in me the inquisitiveness of learning things very deep. Okay? So there was a lot
Mm.
of debugging that I had to do in those labs, about the networks and stuff. So and then moving on to Cognizant, I was again uh, very privileged to be in the wing of Cognizant, which was then called the Global Technology Office. But again, I got opportunity to work with some of the brightest minds. I got a good
Nice.
mentor, a good manager whom I was reporting to. He's supposed to be one of the founders of Converse. So I was working under he was then leading the IoT part of the GPO, wherein I got to work with some of the leading technologies that were flourishing at that time, like IoT and all that. So everywhere, like when I started my career, I would say I had the opportunity and launchpad to get into learn the technologies that were like booming at that
Cool, cool. That explains your learning and growth, right? Because those are the things that even one of my manager when I used to work in tech, I used to say, "Well, learn as much as you can. Don't think twice about it. If you get a term, learn as much as you can, because the more you learn, the more you grow. Kind of the moment that you stop learning, the moment that will stop your growth, right?
time.
So that was the principle he had, and that's kind of a principle that even I mentor to some of the people. If you find time, spend on learning something new. It may be technology, it may be real estate, it may be finance, but keep learning because that's what will help you grow. irrespective of which domain you are, what you are, but you have to have that constant learning of new information, which
Right.
kind of develops you in overall ability to grow, right? So fantastic insights. And when it comes to learning part, right? So what's harder in learning something new and unlearning old habits, right? So I'll say one example is for me, I take decisions quick, right? For me, sometimes it's very hard for me to sit on a decision, think on it 1 day, 2 day. No, it's impossible for me. That's one of the old habits that I have. If I feel like, hey, this is good thing that I have to do, I will do it immediately. So that's what, kind of in trying to unlearn, try to do the pros and cons, why we should do, what is the need and everything. But it's more of a gut feeling that I follow. If it's good, I'll go ahead with it, right? So that's one of the unlearning habits that I'm trying to follow. But in your experience or in the past, like what is something that learning new is along with unlearning old habits? What's the difficult part?
Yeah. So as you rightly said, I think you nailed it correct. The unlearning is definitely harder. So for example, like I was saying, when I started my career, I was working most of structured programming. Okay, and I had to like move on to the event-driven programming in Node.js. I had to completely rethink how I approach coding. Okay, because coming from a very structured programming like C and C++, you do something, a completely different language, event-driven programming in Node.js. It takes a lot of, because you cannot think in C++ and code in Node.js. Okay,
Yeah,
and the intricacies of the language would be like entirely different, and you need to like unlearn all the concepts that you worked in C and C++, and then you need to start fresh, and then understand the nuances of the language, and then start working on it. So letting go of what worked for you in the past is not easy, because that's where your whole experience comes in. But it is
yeah.
necessary if you want to like grow. So during my entire career, like I've been shifting technology. Like I started with C, C++, learned Perl, and then moved on to machine learning, Node.js. I learned Python, Go, and like in the last few months, I started coding in Rust and React. So whatever be the
Nice.
technology, you need to like start fresh. Your fundamentals are the same, your basics are the,
Yes.
but you need to understand the nuances of the language. You need to understand why a particular language is built for what it is good at, and then unlearn all the concepts you have learned earlier and start fresh, and give the best in which to learn a new language. Okay, so definitely, like you said, learning is the hardest part that I think. But once you do that, once you like come as an empty cup and start pouring in things, definitely it will be helpful for your.
See, staying on with the programming languages, right? You have built large systems, right? See, in my experience, what makes difference in terms of a good developer and a great developer, right? Great developer always thinks about scale, right? Good developer tries to solve the problem, but great developers always tend to build the system for scale. So, what's something that people misunderstand or don't understand about building at scale?
So, people often think scaling is just about handling more users, right? But it's not the
Mm.
case. It's much more complex than that. What works for one or two system may completely fail when you scale to hundreds. Okay, you have to deal with environmental differences. You need to deal with edge cases that you've never heard before. You need to like deal with growing data and unpredictable scenarios. Say, for example, I was responsible for implementing the VAR pipeline. It's a Walmart alarm response processing. It is one of the very great projects that I worked until now. Uh, so, like we started implementing that project for one or two stores within a particular state in the US. But then when you want to like expand it to all the stores, there would be like a lot of differences that would come in. Like there are a lot of different sensors from the refrigeration system that would date back in like 1970s to 2002. So what worked for one system will not work for the other. And at different states with different climatic conditions, you have to cater to a lot of things. It's not just about like scaling is not just like handling more users. Like I said, it is about understanding the whole difference in the system. It works, right? You need to predict a lot of other things that may go into failures. So designing systems that can handle all of that, that is the real challenge of scaling.
Yeah, the more parameters, the more edge cases, and as you rightly said, system working for one or two cases might not work for 100 and 200.
Correct.
You will have a different stress points that will touch up among your machine, that whatever you built using product or hardware, right? Those kind of tend to break on the stress points. So it could be growth of users, growth of functionality, features.
Correct.
They tend to break at the stress points, and predicting and foreseeing those and building at scale is what I've seen couple of developers that I've met in my life, right? They are excellent developers that they can foresee. They say, when we hit this limit, we will face this issue, and this is what we need to do. So they foresee this when they are building systems, and that's what I've seen. There are pretty good developers who can code a feature, get to the market, but there are very few developers who can build at scale and foresee things that are that break before. You know, that's what I've seen. Cool.
Yeah, yeah.
See, yeah,
Basically, you are designing something for uncertainty, right? When you say like implementing something for one system and implementing something for 500 systems across the world with different cultures,
totally.
environment consideration is completely different. Yeah.
Yeah.